The reason that I decided ultimately to take this crazy job as co-chair of the RNC during this insane election, it's for my kids.
You have restored at least my faith in America's election system.
If I ever thought I was tired, I just looked to one man, Donald J. Trump. I can't take time off. He's not taking time off.
You know, so many people would accuse Donald Trump of being a narcissist.
It's easy to throw that at Donald Trump. A narcissist would not have put himself through hell and back. Coming off the heels of an assassination attempt of my father-in-law, I'll be honest, we had a lot of hard years.
What do you think is next for you?
That's the big question. What am I going to do?
Everybody's asking. Lara, it is so great to sit with you here. I really just want to start by thanking you so much because you have restored at least my faith in America's election system.
Oh, wow.
I did not know what's going to happen to our country going into the election season. And when I heard that you're getting involved, I knew that the troublemaker in chief is getting in and fixing things. And thank God for what you have done. And so sitting here with you after the fact and being able to reminisce and talk about everything you went through and also talk about the future is a great opportunity for us as Americans just to hear from you directly. There are so many parents who have been following our show because of education and all the work that we've been doing. And you have had a huge impact on the mama bears that have looked at you and have been inspired by you, and I think have become more active and awake and aware. So just a huge thank you.
Wow. Well, first of all, all of that is so nice. People say thank you to me, and I almost don't know what to say because it almost was like this was the only thing I could do. There was no other option to do something else. When I was asked to run as co-chair of the RNC, I kind of hesitated, if I'm being really honest, and I thought about the implications of this election, the gravity of this election, what role I would play, the fact that my name would be right up there if things went the wrong way too. So the stakes were very high. And honestly, I thought about my kids. And it's so humbling to hear you say that I've inspired mama bears out there. Because I didn't intend to do that, but that was really, I think, what ultimately drove me to fight so hard. It's for my kids, and it was for everyone's kids and the future of this country. And I almost said no to this. And I actually was, the night after my father-in-law called and very persuasively asked me to run for co-chair of the RNC, I kind of was like, I don't know, let me think about it. And that night I was tucking my kids in bed and looking at them and honestly thinking about how much time I was going to have to spend away from them. Because I've been through presidential elections before. If you can believe it, this is our third time around. Hard to say, and I know I don't look a day over 20, so.
I completely agree.
But I really looked at them in that moment and I was like, wow, I could never look at my kids and say, what if? What if I had done this, even knowing what it would mean, knowing what it would cost, for them and our time together. Ultimately, it felt like the only option I had was to try to run for this position and to execute things as well as possible. And we had an amazing team at the RNC. We worked really hard. And to hear you say that faith has been restored on some level to the election process is amazing, because that was our goal. You really can't have a country and call us the United States of America if people don't trust it. And so Michael Whatley and I, when we got in there, we said, okay, there's so much that the RNC tries to do. We try to be everything to everybody, and everybody wants a piece of us, and we're going to pare it back. We're going to say no to everything except getting out the vote and protecting the ballot. And that's what we focused on. And obviously, we're very proud of the results.
When you talk about what your schedule has been like over the last year and the type of sacrifice that you and your family had to make, can you just describe that? Like, were you on the campaign daily? Just give me a little sense of what was your life like?
Well, one of the things that I actually do love about politics in general is that no 2 days are alike. And that's kind of exciting. And I got a sense of that in 2016 when my father-in-law asked me to help him win my home state of North Carolina, which is how I got involved in all this craziness. But this time around, look, being a mom and trying to do this as well full-time was a lot. I'll be really honest. But Look, I would take the first flight out in the morning, spend all day in a state campaigning or doing whatever it was we needed to do, spend the entire day in DC at the RNC if that's what was necessary, only to get the last flight back to make sure that I was there to see my kids in bed before I went to sleep that night. That was important to me. And I think it actually did make a difference for them. As much as I was gone, and I was gone multiple days every single week, I always tried to fit in either dropping them off at school, tucking them in bed at night. And if I couldn't do it, I would FaceTime them and we'd do prayers together alongside my husband. But it's crazy. A presidential campaign is absolute insanity. And so my role in the spring of this past year was more based in DC, based with the team at the RNC, kind of getting everything laid out for the groundwork for actual election season, which is basically the first day early voting starts. You're really out there. This summer, we had obviously a convention. We were the first convention in 8 years to happen. We felt a lot of weight for that, and we were incredibly proud of the product that we delivered. We felt like the hope and joy that you constantly heard about from the Democrats was actually palpable at our convention, ironically, and we weren't setting out to do that. We just wanted to showcase America and the American people. And obviously coming off the heels of an assassination attempt of my father-in-law, him showing up there days before we anticipated him coming, all of it was, I think magical is really the word I would use to describe that. And then obviously you got into the fall and campaigning, and man, it's a full-time gig. And, I missed a lot of my son's basketball games, my daughter's soccer games, because I was gone on a lot of Saturdays. But, I never wanted to leave anything on the field. And if I ever thought I was tired, I just looked to one man, Donald J. Trump. And this is a man who I think 68 days in a row, he was out on the campaign trail, did not stop. And every time I was like, oh, I wish I got a little time off. I was like, I can't take time off. He's not taking time off. So he continued to inspire me throughout this process. And obviously, we got the right results. So I feel like every single Saturday I was away for basketball games, everything that I may have missed, it all has paid off ultimately.
Well, ultimately, your kids will know what you have done for our
I
country.
hope
And
so.
I'm sure they'll be very proud of you.
Yeah.
And, we can talk later on what it's like to be a child of a very busy working mom and really the golden nuggets that can be gleaned from that. But I'm curious about the RNC, because one of the things that you have done in restoring our faith in the system is clean up the RNC, if I can be honest about that. And I'm curious, on day one, what did you see there that needed to be cleaned up? And then over the months, what did you discover? Just help me peek behind the curtain. I want to know why it came across to us like such an organization that needed help.
I think it did need help. And I think we knew prior to that very first day what needed to happen and who really needed to be restaffed. We kind of looked at it, Michael Watley and I, as, when a CEO takes over a company, you want to bring in your own team. You want to have people there who you can rely on, who are proven, who you can trust, who've worked with you in the past in a lot of cases. And what I think we found ultimately was that there was a lot of unnecessary hires at the RNC, people who maybe didn't have a real need to be there. And when I'm going to go out and ask somebody to donate even $10 to Donald Trump's campaign and to the RNC, I want to be a good steward of that money. I don't want it wasted. I don't want for a second people to think that we're wasting money on a staffer who doesn't ultimately need to be there. So we knew prior to day one really what we wanted to do and kind of who we needed to get rid of, so to speak. And I hate to even use that word, but it's necessary. And then, we said to everybody, we're going to have you reapply for your job. And if you want to be here, then we're going to take it on a case-by-case basis. And we felt like that ultimately gave us the best team possible. And, I think that it was necessary not just for the organization, but to start to reestablish some of that trust that the RNC really had kind of lost with a lot of the Republicans across the country. And I heard it time and time again when I would call people who had been supportive of the RNC in the past. A lot of them would tell me the same thing. And they said, I haven't given in a long time, but I feel like what I've seen happen already has inspired me and has assured me that you guys really have a good plan and you understand what needs to happen to restructure the organization. And then from there, it really was just focusing on the two things that I mentioned before, which were getting out the vote. We have the best person to do that in Donald Trump, of course. But to get a little more specific, we wanted to make sure that we started talking about early voting. And I'll actually never forget, I went and spoke at CPAC in February, and this is before I took over as co-chair of the RNC. And I said, look, one of the things we're going to have to embrace as Republicans is early voting. And I know it's not popular, and I know people don't want to hear that. And I kind of got a lot of silence from the crowd, if I'm being honest. And I continued to talk about that in speech after speech, but we understood the numbers. And the truth is, if you have an election season, if you have weeks on end of early voting, and we're not capitalizing on that as the Republican Party, we're missing a whole swath of the electorate. And that seemed like it was a bad play in previous elections. So we said, we're going to have to start encouraging people to vote early, and we're going to have to get our low propensity voters out. Those are people who we know every time they come vote will vote Republican, but they don't come out every single election cycle. They might not have voted, since prior to Donald Trump coming down the golden escalator, but we know how to target them. Our data team had them figured out for us. We had a plan in place in terms of how we target those people and how we get them out to vote. So we said, we're going to work on that. And then the election integrity aspect of it, I think, really can't be overstated. And we knew how seriously we had to take this, because we had to reassure people that, yes, it will be worth your time to come out and vote. Even if you wait in a line like people did in Bucks County, Pennsylvania for 6 hours, some of them, it's worth your time to come vote, because your vote will matter and your vote will count. So we said, look, we're going to have to put together a national operation. We're going to have to go to every single swing state, and we're going to have to talk to local media, because not everybody has cable news. And we're going to have to make sure people know we're watching every single vote that's being cast and counted. And we're going to we wanted to recruit 100,000 people. We recruited 230,000 people to be poll watchers and poll workers. And we want to have attorneys every major polling location in the country. And we had 6,500 attorneys that we recruited, most of them volunteer. And because we put this big operation in place, because anyone who wanted to do anything nefarious knew we were watching, and we caught 20,000 issues. We had to address 20,000 issues throughout the course of early voting and election day. I think it did make the difference for a lot of people who, no matter where I went, I got the number one question I got was, will they cheat? Will it be fair?
Yeah.
What are you guys doing? So that was sort of our plan. And focusing on just those two things and nothing else, I think, was really important to show people we were serious.
Can you describe to me what are some of those issues that you heard about?
Yeah, I mean, it's everything. Even if it was, I'll give you an example. I'd go through my Twitter feed, and oftentimes people would tag me. They would tag me, and they would tag Michael Whatley, the chairman of the RNC, in a lot of these posts about a machine in Kentucky that would not allow you to click on Donald Trump and JD Vance whenever people were going to vote. And even if it was something, look, Kentucky is a state we're not concerned about, but we are concerned with making sure people know we're watching and we're addressing issues as they happen. So we would send our team of people to that polling location to address that one specific machine in Kentucky.
Unbelievable.
Because we had to, and then we wanted to respond on X, and we wanted to make sure people would see, yeah, they're looking out. They're making sure everything is happening the right way. I don't think it's a secret what happened in Pennsylvania was we had to get a little aggressive. You had these early voting locations in Pennsylvania. And just to backtrack for a second, Pennsylvania is probably the toughest place in the entire country because they don't have a statewide voting rule. They do it county by county. And so everything is different. And it does make it a little more complicated for us, but we were ready. And in Bucks County, the early voting locations were shutting down very early, actually in several different counties. And so we sent a team out there and we said, you have to make sure that people are having their opportunity to vote. And when we found out they were shutting down early, we filed a lawsuit, and we did what we've done. I think we filed 139 lawsuits throughout the course of this election cycle. And we obviously got 3 extra days of voting in Bucks County. But any issue we saw, no matter where it was, there were things in Tarrant County, Texas that we addressed, another machine that would change people's vote from Donald Trump to Kamala Harris. Whatever it was, wherever it was, we sent people out and we made sure that we addressed it.
What do you think made your team different from the past team? Is it that a new, fresh set of eyes, or is it just a hustle that was in you? Sometimes you bring in a new team and they're just more energized, or was there just complacency in the past? I can't imagine that these issues that you saw didn't exist 8 years ago.
Well, I think the first step in solving a problem is actually talking about the problem. And I think previously people were very nervous about discussing election integrity. It got people upset, and it was a hot button topic for a lot of people. You could be heavily criticized for even contemplating that there could be a problem in our voting process. But if you have half the country, Marissa, thinking that their vote isn't going to matter, or that there's something nefarious going on, that's a big problem.
Big problem.
And so we started talking about it. And I don't think that there was enough real conversation previously, certainly in the wake of 2020. I mean, there were a lot of lessons to be garnered from that election. And I think a lot of people felt like 2022, those midterms, a lot of the problems should have been addressed, and maybe they weren't. They weren't even really discussed. And so we talked about it, and we weren't shy in talking about it. In fact, we tried to talk about it all the time, ad nauseum. And I was like, I'm so sorry. I'm going on another show talking again about election integrity and the team and recruiting people. But we felt like that was fundamental to it. So I think that in and of itself was very necessary. I don't think you can actually tackle a problem if you're not willing to at least talk about it.
And not be shamed into being called some crazy kook because
I've been called every name in the book, and that's okay with me.
It's okay. I'm a white Christian nationalist Barbie. I don't know.
Oh, I'm sure I have that moniker too. It's very nice.
So the other thing that changed recently is the culture around elections. And I think you had a big piece in that, where in the past it was all about legacy media. You were ashamed to be a Republican. You had leprosy if you were a Republican. Even in places like New York and California, you couldn't walk around and to go into a restaurant, claiming that you're a Republican. I think things are really different now. Even in California, you have really changed the culture. I think elections are viewed in a different way. Even what we're expecting of politicians is different. I don't think we'll ever vote for someone who cannot sit down and do a long form interview ever again. No more scripted stuff. We want to know who it is that we're electing. And we are okay with the bad as long as it's not hidden from us, right? And so it's not that everybody is perfect, but I think we want real, authentic people. And I think that's one of the things that even J.D. Vance brought to the table, is that he's authentic. He's real. And so much of that has changed. And I'm curious, what are these other things that you have noticed, and was it planned? Did you plan to break the culture?
I would love to say yes. We had a plan all along. We held it back for 9 years. I have to give glory to God, obviously, in this front. And look, I've always felt like the truth will ultimately come out on all things, no matter what we're talking about in life in general. I feel like the truth always rises to the surface, and you always ultimately find out, no matter what it is. And I'll be honest, we had a lot of hard years being part of the Trump family. Certainly was not made easy for us. 2015, I don't think any of us knew what to expect after my father-in-law came down the escalator to announce he was running for president. And I think we all were very naive in what we anticipated. Now, I will say my father-in-law knew. I'll never forget the conversations we had with him prior to the day he announced he was running for president. He said to us, look, first of all, we're going to find out who our real friends are. But I need you guys to understand, as a family, this isn't just about me. It will encompass all of us. And if I do what is necessary, they're going to come after me. It will not be easy, and it will involve all of you. And you guys need to understand that. And I need to hear that you're okay with that. Of course, we're all like, well, how bad could it get? This couldn't be that bad, right? And we all said, yeah, no problem. But nothing could have prepared us. Nothing could have prepared the country, quite frankly, for what ultimately we saw happen to Donald Trump, not just in the 2015, 2016 election cycle, but obviously everything that's happened in the past several years. And I think, having lived through very tough times as a member of the family, I can't get rid of the name Trump. I never would want to. I'm proud to have that last name. But look, we just did what we thought was right all the time. And we were true to ourselves, and no one more so than Donald Trump. And it is interesting to see the culture shift, because it became counterculture to be a Republican. It became the cool thing to do to be a Republican, anti-establishment. And since the dawn of these parties, that really hasn't been the case.
Yeah.
It is right now. And I think it's because of one man, because of Donald Trump. He never gave up. He never stopped fighting for this country. He was fake about anything. And good, bad, or indifferent, you got to take, like you just said, you got to take the good with the bad. And while he's not perfect, he's perfect for right now. And I think a lot of people saw what he went through over the past several years. They understood that this is a man who knows it's so much bigger than him. And I think that's the thing we all felt. None of this was ever about us. This is about the country. And when it's bigger than you, it's easy to fight for it, even in the midst of all the chaos and all the negativity and really feeling like you're fighting an uphill battle so many times. But you know what? I think that the American people are smart. And I think there was only so long that the wool could be pulled over their eyes. And once you start becoming, a meme, but a funny meme, or the Trump dance starts taking over, or you're talked about again in rap songs like you once were prior to running for president, that's when you know a culture shift has happened. And yeah, it's really palpable out there. People are unafraid to say they're Republican. They're unafraid to say that they voted for Donald Trump. What's funny to me is I've heard from a lot of people that their neighbors didn't have any Trump signs up prior to the election, but after election day, they all put their Trump signs up. I'm like, well, that's interesting. I wish they were up before, but that's okay with me because I want everybody on board. And even those people, Marissa, who didn't vote for Donald Trump, I actually believe they're going to see something happen over the next 4 years that really is going to be hard for them to look away from in a very positive way with Donald Trump. I think they're going to understand they've been lied to about this man. I think they're going to understand that he really is the right person for right now, that everything that he has gone through has been so that he can do what's right for this country. And I think once people start seeing those changes happen, they're going to wake up even more. Most of America, I feel like, has woken up. We won the popular vote in this election. But the culture shift has been absolutely fascinating to watch. And I'll give it to God and Donald Trump. They did it.
So many people would accuse Donald Trump of being a narcissist and that the reason he was running and now is going to become president is because it's all about him, and him wanting, his glory. Mm. What's your reaction to that, given how well you know him?
It's so false. Nothing could be farther from the truth. It's easy to throw that at Donald Trump. He's a narcissist. A narcissist would not have put himself through hell and back for something like this. A narcissist, at the first inclination of some sort of pain for themselves, would have said, I can't do this anymore. This isn't worth it for me. I want to take an easy way out. This, I can do things that are a bigger deal than this and not, receive all of the incoming at the same time. He never did that. He stood his ground and he fought hard. And I mean, my gosh, he even took a bullet for this country, I would say. Most people, after having an experience like that is a near-death experience. He was millimeters away from death. And a lot of people would have looked at that and said, I see what this is, and I see the attempts on my life, and I can't do this anymore. It's not worth it. But again, when it is so much bigger than you, and I think after that experience, especially on July 13th in a field in Butler, Pennsylvania, I don't think there's any doubt that God had a hand in this. And if you ask my father-in-law, he will tell you he's here right now because God wanted him to be here. And he believes that his charge is to do what's right to save America. And by doing that, really save the world.
How did that horrific and scary experience impact the family? Are you afraid?
I'm not, because he's not.
He's not afraid?
No. I know he's a remarkable human being. It's one of those things, like if you're on an airplane and there's turbulence and everyone kind of looks around at the flight attendants. If the flight attendants are calm, then you're like, all right, well, yeah, I guess everything's going to be okay. He, throughout the course of all of this, the raid on Mar-a-Lago, beautiful Mar-a-Lago, where we are today, the indictments, one after another, the mugshot, the assassination attempts, he has never showed any fear whatsoever. He's never been concerned on any of these fronts whatsoever. We all were very concerned about all of these things as family members. But when you look at him, he's cool as a cucumber. He's calm. He's relaxed. He knows that everything's going to be okay. And when someone acts like that, it makes you then feel better and like, okay, everything's going to be okay. I mean, honestly, I think a lot about the people who probably would like to see Donald Trump not exist anymore. And it's always in the back of my mind. It's always in the back of my husband's mind and my brother-in-law and sister-in-law and all of us. I'm sure Melania. But you can't operate like that. You know, you have to focus on the good things and you have to believe that God has him here for a purpose and that God's going to continue to look out for him. He did it twice already. I believe he'll continue to do it.
How do you handle the relationships with people who are suddenly your best friends again? I know that I'm experiencing it. I went from having leprosy to suddenly being healed. Mm-hmm. I can only imagine that you lost a lot of friends throughout the years and regained some random ones. How do you choose who to trust? And do you forgive?
I'll always forgive, but I'll never forget. And I think we all kind of feel like that in the Trump family. Look, I'll never forget who was right here at Mar-a-Lago in November of 2022 when Donald Trump announced he was running for president again. And I'll never forget the people who also posted online and thought that maybe I'd forget about it, maybe Eric would forget about it, maybe Donald Trump would forget about it, that had really unkind things to say. And having gone through this now 3 times and having had the 4 years of my father-in-law in the White House, you do learn a little bit more about how to read people, how to judge people. And look, nothing's perfect. I certainly was burned the first time around by several people who I thought were my friends, but I think we could all say that in the Trump family. And I think we have a small core group of people who we know we can trust, and those people will be in our lives probably forever. And other than that, you have to kind of guard yourself. And I don't want to say it's a shame you have to operate like that. I think everybody naturally does that in your life, no matter who you are. But we certainly have seen a lot. We've learned some hard lessons before, and we'll remember. We'll remember who was there, and we'll remember who wasn't there. And I'll always be kind to people. I always welcome people to come be on the team. If you're on the team now, you're on the team now, and I like that. But you know, with a certain amount of reservation, we have to be smart about it.
You think some of those smart lessons are being applied now with the new administration? People are critical of some of the outsiders that are being brought in, but I'd only imagine that there is some issues with trust from the past.
Yeah. Well, Donald Trump himself will be the first to say, look, if there's one mistake I made, basically before I even took office, it was that I didn't know the people in Washington, D.C. I'd never been a politician before. This was all brand new to me. And quite frankly, no one expected him to win. So it wasn't like there was a whole team putting together a transition crew for him in 2016. And so when he won, he did heavily rely on people at the RNC, people who were establishment folks in Washington, D.C. And obviously a lot of that was to his detriment. These are people who worked behind the scenes to stab him in the back, to sell stories, to leak to the press as much as they possibly could, instead of actually doing the job that they should have been doing for the people of this country. Having taken those lessons in, believe me, he's not apt to make that mistake again. He's got a lay of the land. He knows who he can trust there. He knows who he can't trust. And if you look at the team of people he's assembled around him, I think it's very indicative of that. Are they the most typical political choices to appoint people in these cabinet positions? Absolutely not. But Donald Trump is not a typical politician. And likewise, he doesn't have a typical cabinet. And I think that that's actually going to be one of his great strengths over the next 4 years, is that he's putting people in place who, yeah, of course, he knows he can trust, but he knows will work hard for the American people. He knows can execute these jobs. They are not, identity politics hires. They are not there for any other reason than that they need to get in there. They need to do the hard work. And we have 4 years to accomplish a lot for this country. And he knows they'll be able to do it.
It's also an interesting blend because they're not all the same. Not all the people that he's choosing. And so sometimes people are like, what? I can't believe he chose this one. Oh, but thank God he chose that one. And I feel like many people are having that kind of a reaction, but maybe that's what unifies everybody behind him.
Well, and something else too, I'll say about my father-in-law, and I'll be the first to admit it, and I've told him this, There have been times in the past where I will call him and I'll say, I don't know about this. Like, I think you should look at this differently. And he'll be like, no, I think you have to trust me on this. And 6 months, a year, 2 years, even sometimes later, I'm like, oh my gosh, he was right. He understands so much of what needs to happen in this country and how he has to apply it in his cabinet and who he needs to have by his side to do these things. It's funny because I've stopped second guessing him. Any decision he makes in so many cases. Now I'll tell him if I think something is off.
Is he open to that?
Oh,
is he open to criticism and pushback?
I actually think that he appreciates it, to be honest with you. And he's a person who likes to get input from everybody. If you find yourself in a room or on the plane with him or whatever it is at a dinner with him and a topic comes up, he probably is going to ask everybody in the room, and he seeks out the person who's kind of like looking down, like, don't call on me, don't ask me. He's like, well, what do you think about this? He wants to get that input, but then he ultimately makes that decision. And it's just funny because so many of the things that I've pushed back on him so hard in the past for, he actually ultimately was right. And so I think a lot of people who might have questions or concerns about some of these appointments are going to come to see that really it's the best possible fit.
It's a pretty young administration.
Yeah, it really is.
It's so interesting.
It's a young and the word the Democrats like to use, diverse and different administration. Yeah. My gosh, you have former Democrats and some people who I don't even know what their political affiliation is. And Donald Trump says, I don't care because I know they're going to do a great job and I know they're the right fit for these positions. But that's what we want. I think that's, to have, it's no different than us coming into the RNC, having fresh eyes on things. Most of these people have not been in Washington, D.C. in this capacity before. You have Tulsi Gabbard, who was a former Democrat congresswoman. You have RFK Jr., whose name is synonymous with Democrat politics. They're coming together for this administration because of Donald Trump. That's the team he's assembled around him. I think it's fantastic.
It's so interesting. How did the family react to bringing in former Democrats? Were they thinking, oh my gosh, what is Donald Trump doing? Or were you kind of into it?
I love it. Look, I actually believe, and I know people will say this is crazy, Donald Trump will be the person to unify this country. I really believe it as divisive a figure as the media has tried to make him. Mm. I believe he will be the person who really bridges the gap between Democrats and Republicans. I believe he will be the person who really opens a lot of people's eyes in this country. And look, you can give him credit for getting people re-involved in politics or involved in the first place. A lot of people were just kind of like asleep and they'd go vote every 4 years, maybe, not really. Whether you love Donald Trump or you don't, he probably got you interested in politics. Yeah. And that's a great thing for our country. No, I don't think any of us had any concerns about that. I love it. I think that that's who this man is. He really has never cared about a label with anybody. And you can go back and look at his company and look at the people who he had in some of the best and the highest positions in his company. Some of the executives in the Trump organization were unlikely people. They started as drivers or doormen or security guards. And he saw something in these people and he said, why don't you take a chance? And why don't I see if you can do something different? No other person would have given them a shot, but Donald Trump did. And I think that there's a lot of that in what you see him doing as a president. And I think that that's such a good thing for this country, such a refreshing thing for this country, whether it's the people he has working alongside of him in this administration, or whether it's how he executes the job of being commander-in-chief and president of the United States, to do things a little bit differently and come at it from a bit of a different perspective than the old guard, than the standard political background. That is so good for this country. And we saw it the first 4 years. They made it very challenging for him. He had a lot of wind resistance, shall we say, that he had to work against. But I think that this time around, it'll be very different. He's got a lay of the land. He knows what needs to happen. And I think that kind of background and that kind of mind is so great for this country.
Lara, there are so many people around the country who have been told that a monster is coming into power. What is your message to them?
Well, Donald Trump will work hard for you, whether you voted for him or not, whether you want to give him an opportunity to really see what he can do as president or not. He's going to work hard for you and he's going to make your life better. And I don't blame him either, Marissa, for believing those things, because I say it all the time. If I got my information and my news from certain outlets, I would probably think he's a monster too. But I actually know him. This is my father-in-law. I've known him for 16 years. And I can tell you that he has such a great heart. He's such a great human being. He's a great father-in-law, a great dad to my husband and his siblings, and a great grandpa to my kids. I hope people will give him an opportunity. I hope that they take a minute and just remove what they've heard about Donald Trump from the equation and say, let's look at what he's actually doing. Is he doing anything scary? No. You know what he's doing? He's trying to protect America. He's trying to protect you. He's trying to protect your family, the future of this country. He wants us to have a safe and secure country. He wants us to have safe communities. He wants us to have more money in our pockets. He doesn't want us to send our next generation overseas to fight wars that we have no business being in. He wants to make sure that the right things are happening. And whether you voted for him or not, he will do it for you. And trust me, your life will be better because of him.
What is your message to women who've been told that he's a scary monster?
It's the same thing, I think. It's sad that that's the tactic that is utilized by the media and by the left, fear-mongering and scare tactics. I think when you've reached that level, you've lost already. And I think that I had a great feeling about this election. Obviously, I left no chance. We kept our foot on the gas. But once they started employing those tactics, I think it became pretty clear you have no other message.
Do you remember that ad that Kamala had where women were voting secretly so their husbands won't find out?
Absolutely.
Do you remember that
Yeah,
one?
of course.
I don't think I'll ever forget it. It was so demeaning. Hide it from your husband.
Right. It's ridiculous. Look, whether you're talking about, they love to bring up the abortion debate. That was a main driver for the Democrats this election. Donald Trump has said, and you'll see the proof is in the pudding when he's in the White House, he will not sign a federal abortion ban, that the most democratic of things has happened. The issue of abortion, which no two people will probably look at alike in this country, has gone back to the states so that every person in America can actually vote on this. It's not left up to 9 people in Washington, D.C. It's not left up to 1 person in Washington, D.C. It's up to all of us in our respective states to vote on it. Some states will be very liberal in their interpretation of abortion laws. Some will be stricter. But whatever you've been sold about this man has been to play to your emotions. And the truth of the matter is what he actually wants to do, I hope you really take a long, hard look at. And I hope that you really see how you were lied to. We're already seeing the lies being exposed. And I believe that light will come to all the dark places. I really ultimately believe that. Like I said, I think the truth ultimately comes out. And you're starting to see it happen now. Like you were lied to about Joe Biden's cognition. You were lied to by Kamala Harris about that. Then she ran for president, took his place. They kicked him right out of that spot, plugged her in. They continued to lie to you about a whole host of things. And they've been lying about who Donald Trump is as well. And if you just give him a chance, I promise you will see the same person that I have.
What is the family's reaction to the charges against Donald Trump being dropped now?
Yeah. Well, did anyone have any idea that there were anything other than political? The whole reason all of this happened was to prevent Donald Trump from becoming president. Well, he's president now. He's going to be president on January 20th of 2025. And I think it's one of the actual reasons that a lot of people voted for Donald Trump. I think they saw how they attacked this one man and thought to themselves, wait a minute, is this America? Or is this a communist country?
Yeah.
These are Soviet-style tactics being used against one man for political purposes. And you can look at any of the different cases and very clearly see how if the name wasn't Donald Trump and he weren't running for president, none of this would have ever happened. Obviously, I'm glad to see that that's occurring, but I think there's a long way that we have to go to restore trust in a lot of these agencies. And a lot of these are fundamental to our country. You have to be able to trust our Department of Justice. A lot of people don't right now because they've seen how it's been used and weaponized against one man for politics. And I think that's why a lot of these appointments are going to be important. He's not looking to go in for revenge. He's not looking to go in for retribution. He says success will be my revenge, but he does want to restore much needed trust to a lot of these agencies and a lot of these foundational pieces to our country. And look, I hope part of that started on November 5th, whenever people said, oh, wait, there wasn't massive cheating and widespread fraud in this election. But there's so much more that needs to be done. And I think that's also one of the things that he really wants to focus on over the next 4 years.
It's a huge issue that we can't trust our institutions.
Yes.
How do we live in a country without trusting the medical system, the education system, the legal system, every single one of these issues? And what a behemoth to tackle.
Yeah. Well, and that's why we have great minds like Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy coming in, working for free at Doge, making sure we're cleaning up the wasteful spending and the unnecessary spending in our government and really focusing it on those things, making sure you get people put in place who are not out there to, weaponize the system against another political opponent, the people who actually did it to Donald Trump. But look, if you did something against the law, you should be held accountable. We should never see another time like this in the United States of America. The founders of our country are probably rolling over in their grave, looking at what has occurred in this country over the past couple of years, because this is what they wanted to prevent from happening. And I'm so grateful that the people of this country saw through it. They understood what was going on and they rose to the occasion, because it would have been easy to say, the whole system's broken. Nothing's going to change.
Some people did that.
Some people did do that.
But most didn't.
So many came out, though, that it was such a resounding win. And look, I would have taken a win's a win. I would have taken any win possible. Yeah. But this win was so important with the popular vote, with 312 electoral votes, with all the swing states won by Donald Trump, the movement in states like California, New York, New Jersey, Virginia. That is really powerful. And I think it speaks to the fact that the people want their country back. They want things set straight. They want it done the proper way. And they really believe Donald Trump will be the person to do it.
What else can we do, Lara? How do we continue being supportive of the cleanup crew and everything that needs to be done? Everyday Americans, we want to do more to save our country.
Well, I think you can get involved in whatever way you can at a local level. I think, one of the things that has really occurred to me over the past 9 years, and it's crazy to say it's been 9 years since we all got involved in this in the Trump family, is that we need more good people to run for these jobs. And whether it's at the top as president of the United States or whether it's your local school board, there's always something you can do. And I would also say educate yourself. Continue to learn and continue to be open to learning information and seek a lot of different sources. Please don't just go get it from one source, because you're probably not getting the full picture. I think that all will be important to the future of this country, because look, we're really blessed to know that Donald Trump will be there for 4 years. But 4 years from now, we'll be in the midst of another transition. Yeah. And whoever is going to take the helm after Donald Trump will certainly not be able to just take your foot off the gas. They're going to have to keep pushing forward and making sure that, this country stays on the right track. It was never given to us, and it was never said to be easy. We have to work for it. We have to fight for it. We fought for it this time. We have to keep it. And I think it'll be important that people stay educated and up to date on everything that's going on.
Yeah, what we say at PragerU is education got us into this mess. Education will have to get us out of this mess. And so I'm very enthusiastic to see what happens with the Department of Education. But not only that, I think the mama bears have woken up, and so have the dads. And so there's a lot to be done. I love the idea of running for school board and just getting involved in kids' education and making sure that the next generation knows that there's something worth fighting for. We've been teaching our kids to hate their own country. Ugh. It's horrendous.
It's
and
terrible.
I know that's what we bonded over originally a few years ago, is how do we raise Americans that love America?
Right. Well, and I think you have to. It's insane that we've taught anybody to hate our own country. No other country does that in the world. Yeah. You look at the problem at the southern border. Certainly Kamala Harris and Joe Biden invited all of these people in when they said, we're rolling back everything Donald Trump put in place. Stop building the wall. It is egregious what's going on at our southern border. I've gone down and actually seen it with my own eyes, and it's unbelievable to talk to some of the Border Patrol. But you have to ask yourself, why is it? people want to come here? Why is it people are willing to risk their lives to come to America? Why is it that a third of the women coming up are sexually assaulted and yet they're still willing to go through that? Why is it people are sending their children unaccompanied with coyotes to the United States of America? It's because this is the greatest country on earth. It is because, yeah, we're not perfect. We're working towards that every single day. But you are never going to find a place as free as America. You are never going to find a place where it doesn't matter who you are, how you started, what your foundation is. You have the opportunity in America with hard work and spirit to rise to any level of success. Just look at our next vice president, JD Vance. He's a great example of that. And so I think that it is so important to start teaching our kids really who we are as a country. And we take it all, the good and the bad. You have to teach history or history is doomed to repeat itself. And I think that Linda McMahon at the Department of Education will be a great fit. I think she's going to do an incredible job. And I think that you're going to see a lot of big change coming to specifically education in this country, and it's needed.
What do you think is next for you? What are you planning on doing next?
That's the big question. What am I going to do?
Everybody's asking.
You know, it's amazing because I never anticipated being part of any of this. You know, I think back to growing up in Wilmington, North Carolina. I went to public schools my whole life. I have such an incredible family. My parents are still married. They've been married for 44 years now and still live in the same home I came back to the hospital from. I don't know. I think that I've seen the incredible side of all of this. You know, we've seen the good and the bad with politics. I certainly have seen the worst of the worst, but I've also seen how impactful one person can be on so many. And to be able to travel this country like I have really since 2016, see people, hear their stories, understand how their lives have been impacted by specifically my father-in-law, it's been transformational. It's been incredible to hear and to have played a role as co-chair of the RNC and fought, you know, alongside an incredible team of people. It's been amazing. And so I'm kind of open to whatever the future holds. Honestly, I put it in God's hands. I really do. And I'm lucky that I have a great supportive husband who, no matter what kind of crazy idea I come home with, I'm like, hey, listen to this one. Your dad called me. He's always going to be there.
Is he supportive of that?
Oh yeah. No. It's funny because not being born a Trump, you have an idea in your mind as to like what Trumps might be like. And I certainly, when I found out my husband's last name, after we first met, I didn't know initially who Eric Trump was. I didn't know he even existed. But when I found out, I was kind of like, yeah, I don't know about this. Cause you think,
pressure?
You think that maybe this guy's not going to be so cool to be around and maybe he's going to be, you know, stuck up and this, that, and the other. And what I can tell you is that Donald and Ivana Trump raised incredible children. I'm lucky enough to be married to one of them. And whatever it is that comes my way, I know my husband will be supportive of. So waiting to see what the future holds. So the answer is I don't know.
Well, since you brought up your husband, I have to ask, how were you okay dating for, was it 5 or 6 years before he proposed? What was that like? How are you okay with that?
You know what? In retrospect, I shouldn't have been okay with it. It's funny because I planned to move to New York for like a year. I went to culinary school when I moved to New York. And it was kind of my rationale for moving in general, which my parents were probably horrified by. Sorry, mom and dad. But I met Eric like 6 months after moving to New York. And I never anticipated staying longer than a year. And then he convinced me to stay another year and another year. And then I turned around and I was like, wait a minute, this has been 5 years. And right when I was about to get a little cranky with him, he decided to propose to me. So he barely squeaked it out. But I do remember I said to him one time, I said, just don't do me wrong. That's all I said. I said it one time and he'll tell you, he's like, you only said it to me that one time. I wasn't going to pressure him. I wasn't going to get crazy, but I needed him to know like, hey dude, like do the right thing here. And I could tell, like he's such a good person and has great morals and obviously was raised very well, and oddly had the same sort of, and we pride ourselves in the South having a great set of morals and a foundation. I felt like Eric Trump could have been a Southerner because he seemed that way to me when we first met. And so I told him that one time, and he did right by me. And gosh, we just had our 10-year wedding anniversary.
Did you have these moments where 2 or 3 years in, you were like, okay, I'm gonna get my nails done. It's about to happen. And then suddenly it didn't?
Yeah. Yeah. I think everybody
Must
does.
have, right?
Yeah. Well, what I'll tell the girls out there listening to this.
Because girls are listening, and there are many women in this situation where they don't know if the guy's going to ever propose, and they keep waiting around, and then it doesn't happen. But then they look at you, and it's, the perfect fairy tale story.
Oh gosh. Well, that's so nice. Well, you have to know your worth, and you have to make that apparent to your significant other. And I think that if you know the person you are with is a good person and has a good heart and a good soul, you just have to, one time's enough. Just say, just don't do me wrong. And if you think it's not working, you need to let me know as well. And, I just always felt like the right thing was going to happen. Maybe I've put like too much stock in God and the universe and all this stuff, but I kind of
worked
have
out
my
pretty
whole
well.
life. Yeah. So I don't know. It seemed to work out for me.
Final question, maybe the most important one. What do you think your kids have learned from watching mama work so hard, have so much tenacity? What, you wake up like in the middle of the night to work out? I'm confident, given the way you look.
Sometimes I have woken up at very, very odd hours to get a little gym time in. But that's my time. Even if it's like 30 minutes, that's what people know about me is I don't need a lot of downtime. I don't need a lot of free time. In fact, I don't really like it. I'm not going to be one to be like sitting around on a, lawn chair in front of a pool type of thing. But I do need my me time. And whether that's going for a run, going and doing a little something at the gym, a bike ride, I'll fit it in. And yeah, my husband's like, what time are you waking up tomorrow? I'm like, don't worry about it. It's fine. I just need a little something. Gosh, but my kids, I think every parent hopes that you're a great example for your kids. And, it's the reason that I decided ultimately to take this crazy job as co-chair of the RNC during this insane election. But I hope that they know that whatever it is they want to achieve, they can do it. You're going to have to work for it. You can't, think that everything's going to come easily. There are going to be, very tough days, and there will be some very exciting days and very positive days. But, I hope that my son looks at me and one day chooses a spouse that maybe has the same sort of work ethic and drive as I do. And I hope my daughter herself has the same sort of work ethic and drive. And, there very clearly are differences between boys and girls and men and women. But what I think is very cool about my kids is that I hear them talk about things and they have no idea that one thing is traditionally a male-dominated field or a female-dominated field. And that feels right to me. Just, they'll figure it out one day and they'll figure out the right fit for themselves. But my daughter the other day was like, well, Mom, when you were on the football team at NC State, what were you out there on this? And I was like, no, I was a cheerleader, but I did love the football team. It's just funny because I think that feels really natural and really right. And I hope that they're learning that, again, anything they want to do is achievable. They have a great grandfather who's shown them that. And I think often about when they realize one day who grandpa really is, because they really just know him as grandpa. Yeah. They love coming to see him because he gives them all kinds of goodies, candy, all the stuff the grandparents are supposed to do, takes them on the golf cart, lets them drive. But when they realize what he's been through for them, and I really believe a lot of this has been for his grandchildren and the next generation of America, I hope that they're really proud of him, and I hope they're really proud of me too.
Yeah. Well, I am sure there will be. And, bless you, Lara. Keep going.
Thank you.
Love you to the moon. Thanks for everything that you've done for us. You give me hope. You give all of us hope.
Oh,
so
thank
really
you.
Appreciate you.
Thank you. We're right back at you.